recent years, Fleet Street has been slow to introduce new technology. It isn't that they don't know what it is, but a series of disputes caused by human resistance to change, anxiety over job losses, and vested interests of all kinds has held up its implementation. Some provincial newspapers have introduced the new techniques, but we thought it would be interesting to go and find out how new methods of working has changed the culture of a large, old-established daily newspaper. Shea Stadium, New York City, on a hot night in August, and the New York Mets, the worst team in the league, have the misfortune to be playing one of the best, the Atlanta Braves.
And a fly ball loose.
The Mets are the team the fans love to hate. They've lost their last 25 games in a row, and they're expected to lose tonight. Sports reporter Jim Tuitt is covering the game for the New York Times.
Swinging a line drive base hit down the left field line. Kingman will score. Brooks around second, stopping there. Now it's 4-3.
These portable units provide writers with a full range of electronic editing facilities and can store a whole page of the New York Times.
When the machines first were distributed to the reporters, they were despised and detested by most of the writers. First of all, they didn't like the idea of carrying this huge weapon with them when they went to cover a game. And the first ones were green, and they became known as the Green Monsters. And a lot of the old-time reporters resisted very strongly. They wanted no part of it. And gradually, they began using them, and they began to think, hey, you know, this isn't bad.
Direct electronic keyboard entry by journalists has been at the root of British newspaper disputes. In America, it's now common practice.
2 runs on 4 hits. A long hit could win it.
From his terminal, the story can be sent by telephone direct to the newsroom in central New York without having to be retyped. Every word that appears in the Times is edited on some 400 terminals that are directly connected to the newsroom computers. The Times has kept the traditional system of copy flow, so that the electronic paper chain is the same as before. Reporters write their stories, which are then sent to senior editors who review them and in turn pass them on to specialist editors. It's still the chief editor who gives the story the final reading and issues the command to have the story set in type.
Well, I think the focus in the beginning, of course, was the savings of manpower and changing our whole labor situation. But if you look at the long term, what has happened, it's dramatically changed the way we put out the newspaper, but it's changed the kind of newspaper we put out. The Times has been completely revolutionized in terms of its content and its design and its expansion. We went from a 2-section to a 4-section paper.
But at first, the journalists didn't like the change from the familiar methods that worked.
Joe, the sports editor, says, by the way, Ira, he said, we'd like you to learn the word processing, to use the word processing machine. So it was like a silence, and Sandy knew my feelings. Of course, Joe did too. I said, wait a minute. I said, I took the job with the understanding I wouldn't have to learn the word processing machine, that I could use my 1939 Royal. And I said, I can't learn the word. I'm 40 years old. I'm too old to start learning something like this. And I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. I want to be a prima donna about it, but I just don't think I can learn to write this thing and to be thinking about writing a story at the same time. It'd be impossible for me. And Joe said, just try, just practice at it. And so I was so reluctant, you know, but I went back and I started learning it. And about 2 weeks later, I did my first story. And I wrote it in the office on the word processing machine. And I was kind of embarrassed because it turned out to be a lot easier than I'd ever imagined.
When I came here, which is just 10 years ago, which is a little more than half the life of systems at the Times, we had a bay of equipment in this building, a bay just being from column to column, a few times the size of this office, a normal office space. Today we have almost a half an acre of equipment that it's very hard to weed our way through. We have 4 major mainframe computers, more than 20 mini computers, and literally hundreds of micros. and the better part of 1,000 terminals in this building alone. We're connected remotely to several different cities in the U.S. as well as to cities overseas, and we have more work to do. That's all within 10 years.
There are 9 separate computers linked by a private communications network. The 10th computer is kept as a spare, ready to be substituted for any computer that goes out of action. Anyone who has authorized access can sit at any terminal and sign on to any one of the 9 systems.
I'm sorry?
The journalists are also able to use these computers to search the New York Times Information Service.
Well, welcome to the world of the Harris in-house. At the moment, I'm working on a very long story. Every now and then, as you'll see, I just hit 6 just to end it and take it back in case the computer goes down, as it does many times, and will eat my whole story. So I just ended it to make sure that when it does, if it does go down, it's saved. The story I'm working on, just for background, is a piece about a high school kid who left New York City. He was a basketball player. He went down to New Mexico to go to college and got caught up in an awful scandal. And I'm going to call up my New Mexico story. It's appearing on the screen now. Now I'm going to flash back over to the other side of the screen, and I'm going to call up my quotes. And presto, on the right side of the screen, I'm looking at my quotes. This is a quote that I want, and I want to move this quote right here. So what I'm going to do is identify the block, which is here and here, jump over to the other side of the screen. This is where I want to insert, right here. I've simply hit my shift and my move block, and there it is, right here.
Well, this is the separate database here now that is connected directly to computers in Dayton, Ohio, that store every word that has been published in the New York Times since June 1st, 1980, and store back earlier than that abstracts of stories published as early as 1969. And the search that we've done here talks about London and the BBC, and since June 1st, 1980 in the Times, there have been 374 stories that have had both the word London and the word BBC in them at some point. In addition to London and the BBC appearing in the story, we want the requirement that the word computer or computers has appeared, and it will come back and tell me how many stories there are in that. And we're down now to just 7 stories, which I think is pretty good. And now I ask, rather than look at the top of each story and maybe have to read 100 or 200 words into the story until the words I'm most interested in appear, I can ask it for me to begin displaying those stories, starting with the key words that were in my search. And it's going to come back here and show me that the most recent time that we happen to mention those 3 words in a story was on June 11th, 1983. And we could continue this way through all 7 of the stories until I found that maybe the 5th story really had a complex of material that I was interested in, and I'd have the option of looking right here at the full text of the story. Well, you often need to look back and do research on almost any story that you do. There's some of our investigative reporters that have been very interested in it, where you put in 2 people's names and see if they have both appeared in the same story. Now, that alone doesn't prove anything necessarily, but it can often begin to be the clue to interesting relationships among politicians and various other people down the line.
The way of doing these things may have changed, but the job is still the same. Deadlines still have to be met, and the computer's main role here is in reducing the time between the final story being edited and it appearing in print.
As an editor, it's a marvelously swift and yet private means of communicating with a writer. You don't need to physically tear his heart and soul apart on paper. You can suggest things on a machine in a way that's very fluid and very informal. And yet, I can do it on my time and he can read it on his time.
We have many reporters now at the New York Times who have taken their own money and gone out and bought their own computers. The cost of a decent small computer now is about $1,500. They have the capability then to tap into the information bank, the database that has the past issues of the newspaper, and they have the capability to write a story at home, send it into the Times computer, the editors call it up here on their terminals and put it in the paper. Our economic columnist, Leonard Silk, has a beach house in Maine, and I know that he spends most of his summer up there with his computer, using it to tap into various databases to get information he needs. Then he writes his column, transmits it by telephone to New York, and manages to arrange his summer so he's only in the office 3 or 4 times out of the whole summer, and he's the great envy of the whole office staff.
I'm nostalgic enough to think that culturally it's bad. That is, you used to be able to look up and see an army of reporters sitting out there collectively available. Now they're retreating to cubicles and they're poring over these machines. But on the other hand, through the machines, and I think once the editors learn to deal through the machines, the nature of the work will be enhanced.
A lot of the work that goes on in a journalistic enterprise, whether it's newspapers or television or radio, has to do with people in a newsroom coming together and exchanging ideas. And someone comes in the morning with an idea, and then he and his colleagues sit down and they massage it, and that a different idea emerges. Now, that's not going to happen so much in the electronic cottage, I don't think, because before I was at the Times and I was a freelancer and had an electronic cottage, I was had an early home computer, I eventually found myself becoming isolated and my ideas suffering, and I realized I had to get into the office and talk to people. And when I did that, my ideas were sharpened and the creativity was enhanced. So that's an issue that all creative people who are thinking that this technology is going to allow them to work at home are going to have to address. What the answer will be, I think it's too early to say.
A new group within the paper is now indispensable: the specialists who maintain the complex computer system and its software.
The way the system is configured is anyone in the building can sign on to System 2 with the proper password. So these people over here, or on any of these DIUs, come up over here and sign on through this device, then into the System 2 database.
The system is arranged so that all the text needed to publish the paper is distributed among the 9 machines, so that if one breaks down, they've only lost part of that edition for a period.
We have a disaster recovery plan, for lack of a more positive term, that shows a series of steps to take to do what's called graceful degradation. So if we have a problem, we have ways of falling back depending upon the hour of the day and how close we are to a deadline. We fall back in different ways, depending on the size of the disaster, from something minor to something major.
The Times hasn't lost an edition yet due to a complete technical breakdown, and they're determined to keep it that way. But major bugs in the network could cause chaos. The challenge has been to design it so that if a significant part of it fails, the system still keeps going.
But for right now, he's reseated the cards and reset the box, and people are able to sign on. 18 people? Yeah. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed then.
It means that as you remove pieces of the system, if you're unable to run them for whatever reason, the remainder continues to work as the system should. So the system becomes smaller and smaller, but it's at least in a disciplined way shrinking and continue to support a smaller number of users on it: terminals, wire lines, printers.
But newspapers aren't entirely about journalists and journalism. They're also about selling advertising.
This is the New York Times Classified. May I help you?
Take 7 days
You're interested
straight
in placing
would be
an ad with us?
$212.40. If you take Sunday plus 2 weekdays of your choice, it would be $99.60. Okay, now I'll abbreviate. You tell me what you'd like to say in the ad, okay?
And what's the zip code?
In the past, the method for getting classified adverts from the telephone to the newspaper involved retyping.
So we can't start with the word experience.
This not only introduced errors, but was time-consuming and inefficient.
First thing that we needed was text editing. We had to make sure that it was easy to correct errors, because errors were going to happen. If our people were expected to take 50, 60 ads a day, they were going at quite a rapid pace. And they needed to be able to go back, make those changes, and do it clean.
Errors can now be corrected immediately using the text editor while the customer is still on the phone. and the ad is automatically costed and displayed just as it would be in the paper. Also, the system provides sales prompts to help sell more advertising.
Well, we can start it for you Sunday, but I think you'll do a whole lot better if you give it a chance to run, because Sunday by itself is a really
Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. All 3 days would be 106.50.
Oh, okay, so if we have best-selling weather now, what comes after that?
Well, perhaps with the holiday weekend, you might need the extra 2 to back it up.
Well, we'll send them off to you on a daily basis as soon as we get them in.
Hello? You still there?
But the computer can also bring the illusion of a personal touch.
Now it's just a matter of going in, saying, okay, what's the phone number for billing, putting in the phone number, pressing one button, and a browse of all the ads that that advertiser has placed in the past month comes up automatically. Ah, Mr. Sullivan, are you still residing at 229 West 43rd Street? The person on the other end of the phone says, my God, the New York Times knows who I am, and feels as if we've personalized the call.
And control MRT systems. And for when we have M as in there.
The Times put careful thought into designing what they consider to be ideal working conditions, even to the elegant brass lamp for each operator. But the computers are not only used to store details of customers, they're also used to monitor the performance of the operators themselves.
The news of Week in Review section is going to be more expensive because it's a display classification, and they're going to...
Well, I get the total number of advertisements run during a day. I get the revenue that we generate from that, and I get the gross contribution to margin that we generate in a given day. We also get, I can get individual performance. How many calls were handled by each individual, how many ads were sold, how many multiple orders were sold, and the profit and the amount of money generated from that transaction.
You get the number of ads that they've taken so far in the day, the number of inserts, the number of lines, and how many non-agate lines, meaning how much bigger than the regular type size. It also tells you the percent of multiple lines they've taken and the percent of multiple ads. And each advisor can call this screen up anytime during the day and actually check out how well they're doing in terms of their productivity.
But certain people are worried about the misuse of this information, and the unions in their newsletter have called it the electronic bird dog. They go on. If an ad taker has to look in the dictionary, punch one button. Go to the toilet, punch a button. If there's a lapse of more than 5 minutes between phone calls, a signal automatically flashes on a management terminal. But to a blue-collar worker working on the pressures of a production line, he would take that all for granted. To the white-collar worker, he sees it as a threat, and naturally he's worried. It represents a real challenge to him and to management to work out how to use this system and not to misuse it.
Anytime you talk about terminals or automation, the whole idea of having too much information about people, it comes up. That is, we've had that concern here, of course, like every company has had, except that we've been able to go back to the people by and large and show them what we have, that we don't know everything about them. And in fact, we don't want to know everything about them. What we're trying to do is find out those things that allow us to get into, to know something about the employees' working habits and conditions, where we can go in and help them do a lot better for themselves and for us.
The ninth and last innings of the game. The Mets are all set to lose once again.
The pitch by Bedrosian. And a fly ball, well hit to deep left center field. On the run is the left fielder. Hernandez around third is racing home. The Mets have won the ball game.
The fans didn't expect the sudden turnaround, and nor did Jim Tuitt.
You can't help but start to conceive a lead as you go into the ninth inning, and it looks like the Mets are going to lose. Looks like the outcome is predestined. And so you begin writing your story, and then someone hits a two-run double, or sometimes they'll hit a home run or whatever. And all at once, everything you've written is academic, and now you have to start from the beginning.
Or between first and home, look and see if he's going to catch the ball.
The existence of the electronic terminal allows Jim Tuitt a later deadline than in the old days. So tonight, he's time to visit the locker room to fill in his story.
It wasn't a situation that he baffled me with his knuckleball. The ball was right there, and I just trying to hit the ball too hard.
But Frank, wasn't it more the way you beat them? You know, that ninth inning? It wasn't just beating
well,
them. Ninth
no,
inning.
you know, we had a shot in the 6th maybe to do
Yeah.
something, and Washington made an outstanding play on Staub. I still don't know how he made the play. We just really wasn't outstanding.
It's now only a few minutes before the latest time for Jim to file his copy. Writing a good story under pressure is the skill of a journalist. Using this terminal, he knows that what he types on his machine is what appears in tomorrow's paper. As before, everything now depends on the telephone.
It gives you an opportunity to dispatch your story quickly. This is kind of a one-step operation. Now, you write your story, you put the phone in, and it's gone.
There'll be no dictating errors and no typesetting errors. Only the electronic red pencil of his editor can change his story. Within a matter of minutes, Jim's story can be sent by wire from the newsroom to an electronic typesetting machine. The image produced by a flying spot of light on a strip of photographic paper. The computer has replaced many traditional craft jobs, and there are even plans to computerize the few that linger on. Chief among these are the jobs to do with the design and layout of the pages. The technology hasn't yet quite proved itself to management's satisfaction to be any better than this rather satisfying cut and paste technique. But there's a feeling among the staff that they'll be phased out next. It's just a matter of time. There's no hot type anymore. Nowadays, the newspaper is printed from lithographic plates prepared from photographic negatives. The total number of jobs to produce the paper has remained about the same, although 50% of the old craft jobs have gone. The workers being given substantial separation payments agreed by the unions. But many of those that remain are more highly skilled and more highly paid. The end product is of higher quality. The paper is bigger, printed in more editions, and cheaper to produce. The advertisers are better served, the journalists can work more effectively. But the losers are the workers with outdated skills, and those with a nostalgic yearning for the clatter of typewriters and the smell of hot metal.